Good evening, my students. Welcome back to our lecture of English prose. Our today's topic about addresser-based rhetoric and iconicity. Okay, for the first presentation, I'd like to tell you about addresser-based rhetoric, writing, imitating speech. The rhetoric of is addressee base. This means that the principles of the word we have here, in this case, although they claims on the writer, have functions which can be explained in terms of the reader's needs and responses. However, literary writing also makes use of an addresser-based rhetoric, which reflects the exigencies of encoding. So what should be understood from this point? That by doing writing activity, we also do imitating speech. Okay, that's the point that I want to tell you about the first discussion, the first slide of our discussion. Okay, next, I'll show you about the example of addresser-based rhetoric. As you can see below that there are two examples of sentences. The first one is, we can't go back. The second one is, we couldn't go back to the safe pages. Where the final part of each clause, okay, we mentioned these examples as clauses. Go back to the safe pages, in this case, is given or implied by the preceding context and therefore cannot be treated as the focus of information. The early placing of the nucleus adds to the forceful declamatory effect of the passage and confirms the feeling that it is adapting written language to produce the expressive qualities of speech. Okay, please pay attention to the final part of each clause between go back and go back to the safe pages. There are two different clauses here. Go back and go back to the safe pages. Okay. As you can see that when we add what we call here as the different focus of information, okay, so that it will confirm the feeling that it is adapting written language to produce the expressive qualities of speech. By using the pages, you also produces the expressive quality of speech. Then go back without using the pages itself. Okay, this is the role that the example of addresser-based rhetoric. Okay, by giving the what we call it the different focus of the information. Okay, let's continue our discussion. I'm sorry for the problem of connection that we have had before. So let's go back to our discussion. Once again, I'd like to emphasize that by giving the different treatment or the different focus of information, like I said before, go back in the first clause and go back to the savages. We also produce the expressive quality of speech. Okay, this is the fundamental theory of base rhetoric, or as the example of addresser-based rhetoric. Okay. Please forgive me for the inconvenience. Okay, could you hear my voice well from your place? Could you continue our discussion?
I can well.
Okay. Let's go to the next discussion. We will talk about the use of parentheses. Another case of addresser-based rhetoric is the use of parentheses, especially parenthetical constructions, which are clear. Full berarti kelasnya ya. Okay, I'm really sorry for the inconvenience happened because our class today at the campus is totally full, or our classes today are totally full, so it could give effect to our internet connection. Okay, once again, I'd like to show you about the use of parentheses. Once again, another case of addresser-based rhetoric is the use of parentheses, especially parenthetical constructions, which are synthetically dislocated from their context. A parenthetical constituent, as we have said, runs counter to the memory principle. The addressee has to keep in store the rest of the sentence while the parenthesis is being elaborated. But from a speaker's point of view, a parenthesis is in part a recuperatory mechanism, a way of disagreeing from the main structure of the sentence in order to include something which, with more forethought, could have been integrated into the syntax of the sentence. So here, as you have heard from my explanation, the use of parentheses mainly as what we call here runs counter to the memory principle. So here the addressee has to keep install the rest of the sentence while the parenthesis is being elaborated. So that's the main function of the parenthesis in another case of addresser-based rhetoric. So parenthesis is a very essential in what we call here another case of addresser-based rhetoric. So the function, once again, I'd like to emphasize that It is used by the what we call it the speaker to run counter to the memory principle that the addressee has to keep in store. Okay, there is the speaker and hearer. Okay, addressee and addresser has to keep in store the rest of the sentence while the parenthesis is being elaborated. Okay. So, however, from a speaker's point of view, a parenthesis is in fact a reiteratory mechanism. It is, or it means that a way of digressing from the main structure of the sentence in order to include something which, with more forethought, could have been integrated into the syntax of the sentence. So the role of syntax the role of syntax is very essential or very important. It is set or it is recorded or it is viewed from the speaker's point of view. Okay, next we will discuss deeply about the example of parentheses. Okay, previously we have discussed about the use of parentheses, and now we will discuss about the example of parentheses. For example, they were prancing past this hill. They were streaming to battle. Going to battle, he realized that he had not taken in precisely this thin high sensuous breath of pleasure in close to 24 years. Not since the first time he had gone into combat, and found to his surprise that the walk towards the firefight was one of the more agreeable, if stricken, moments of his life. Later, in the skirmish itself, it was less agreeable. He had perspired so profusely he had hardly been able to see through his sweat. Much later, months later, combat was disagreeable. It managed to consist of large doses of fatigue, the intense final agitations of the tropics, endless promenades through mud, and general apathy towards whether one lived or not. But the first breath had led a feather on his memory. It was in the wind now. He realized that at yes, any part of him had been expecting quietly and confidently for years that before he was done, he would lead an army. The lips of Leon Trotsky and Ernest Hemingway had done nothing to dispel this expectation. Okay, this parenthesis is what we call it use dominantly, okay, from the prose written by Norman Miller entitled The Armies of the Night, Book 1, Part 3, Chapter 2. Okay, as you can see, okay, this is what we call it the example of a part of prose, especially in English. The meaning is quite difficult to be understood, but the thing that, or the most important thing that I want to tell you is about the parenthesis here is used like I said before, okay? You can match what I've said earlier, okay? Here, to keep in store the rest of the sentence. Okay, like this. Okay, to keep the rest of the sentence. And then the second one, it is the way of digressing from the main structure of the sentence. Okay. It is integrated to the syntax of the sentence. Okay, you have to remember that the first function for the addressee is to keep in store the rest of the sentence. Okay, the rest of the sentence. Okay, and parenthesis is uh, used to be elaborated. Okay, or is being elaborated. Okay, to make the sentence clearer. Okay, make the sentence clearer from the previous one without using the parentheses themselves. Okay, I think that's about the example of parentheses. And next, okay, here we have the parentheses again. The example of parentheses, we notice here, as in the Laurent passage, that reading aloud would entail some rather unusual placing of the nucleus. In sentence 4, agreeable occurs 3 times at the end of a graphic unit, and so a shift from and focus can scarcely be avoided. More agreeable, disagreeable, less agreeable. The acceleration of the experience is appropriately conveyed through a jaunty freshness of style, as if the impressions are tumbling out as fast as the writer can get them on paper. So this is what we call it the second example of the use of parentheses. Okay, the use of parentheses, like I said before, to keep the information for the addressee, to make the information clearer than without using the parentheses themselves. And then it is the link of constructing the syntax itself. Okay, next we will talk about the second point of this discussion is the iconicity or the imitation principle. This brings us to a more general consideration of the imitative aspect of literary text. Up to now, we have been dealing with aspects of textual rhetoric which apply both to non-literary and literary writing. But if there is one quality which particularly characterizes the rhetoric of text in literature, it is that literature follows the principle of imitation. In other words, literary expression tend to have not only a presentational function or directed towards the reader's role as decoder, but a representational function or miming the meaning that it expresses. So what I'd like to tell you about the imitation principle, that you have to keep in mind that the principle of imitation itself is not only a presentational function, it's not only has a presentational function, but it also has a representational function. So in short, that okay, let's go back to our discussion. Okay, about the imitation principle. Once again, I'd like to give the underline that the imitation principle of what we call it the iconicity. That's the principle of imitation itself not only has a presentational function but also has a representational function. Like you can see from the slide that presentational function here is related to the directed towards the reader's roles as decoder. Okay, and then the representational function, it's related to the miming, the meaning that it's expressed. So the imitation or the imitating principle itself, what we call it is the obligatory aspect when you want to, what we call it, dealing with aspect of textual rhetoric, which you usually apply both to non-literary and literary writing. So it is a must or an obligatory principle because it's really beneficial or really useful in determining what we call here as determining the representational function, okay, from the aspect of the speaker and also the reader. Okay, as you can see, the next one, we will talk about the examples of iconicity and non-iconicity. So what are the examples of iconicity and non-iconicity? Okay, here we must touch on the iconic element of language in general. A code is iconic to the extent that it imitates its signals or textual forms, the meaning that they represent. The code of traffic sign is largely iconic. A cross route is signaled by a cross, a narrowing route by converging lines, etc. The maritime flag code, on the other hand, is non-iconic. There is no connection between the color and design of a flag and the meaning. Yeah, such as I'm altering force to fort, which it is used to signify. One of the tenets of modern linguistics is that language is essentially non-iconic, that the form-meaning relationship is arbitrary. It has, of course, been acknowledged that language contains certain iconic elements. Well-known examples are onomatopoeic words such as taco, whisper, bang, and on aesthetic series such as class, cling, clam, club, claims, gleam, glimmer, glitter, glare, glow, and gloaming. So what is the difference between iconicity and non-iconicity? From the slide, you can take or what we call it hold the conclusion or what we call it take the comprehension that the code, for example, the code of traffic sign is largely determined as iconic. Okay, for example, the code of traffic sign. For example, here again, you usually see a crossroad is signaled by a cross, a narrowing road by converging lines, etc. Meanwhile, when you want to determine non-iconic or non-iconicity, for example, you can see or you can use the example, the maritime flag code. There is no connection between the color and design of a flag and the meaning. Okay. So here we can take the conclusion that iconicity, okay, iconicity makes the connection between the thing, the color, the design of the thing itself, and also with the meaning. Meanwhile, non-iconicity, okay, makes no connection between the color of thing, the design of thing, and also with the meaning. Okay, here you can see the differentiation by reading or understanding some examples given. Once again, the code of traffic sign, okay, is iconic. A crossroad is iconic because it is signaled by a cross. A narrowing road by converging lines is iconic too. Meanwhile, the maritime flag, okay, the maritime flag code, it's is non-iconic or non-iconic city. So that's or those are the example of iconic city and non-iconic city. Okay, we have arrived to the last slide of our discussion today, and as usual, okay, it is your test, okay, to be answered within this lecture. So we still have 8 minutes before leaving the meeting. Okay, I hope all students could answer it correctly based on the material given. Okay, time is yours. And the material of today's lecture will be sent into our WhatsApp group number. Okay, and also please check your chat column to get the link of the attendance. The first link is for the executive students, while the second one is for the regular one. Okay, once again, I'd like to inform you that there are two types of links, the attendance of today's attendance. That's the first one is for the executive students, while the second one is for the regular one. Okay, time is yours. Okay, because the time is over, I hope this exercise is done at home to be your homework. So there are 5 questions that should be answered correctly by the student and should be submitted next week. Well, thank you for today for your attentive participation and good attention. See you next week and goodbye.
Thank you, sir.